Chapter 6. Life at sea during a great storm is hardly enjoyable, as the discomforts of both mind and body are numerous. The ship's officers and crew are always concerned with the safety of the passengers, as well as the well-being of the steamer and its cargo. However, Marcellus, with his artistic instincts, found himself drawn to the deck, where he spent hours studying the motion of the waves and the ever-changing effects of the ocean. He was awed by its sublimity, and even in the midst of the wildest storm, he found refuge in his sketches of the waves and their combinations, which he hoped to one day reproduce on canvas. But Marcellus was not always at ease during these storms. He had been in love with a pretty Italian girl named Rosie Ricci for a year, the daughter of an official who had long served the Italian government at the port of New York. Rosie was only 15 when they first met, at an exhibition of watercolors on W 10th Street. Dressed in white, she had caught Marcellus's eye as he finished hanging a delicate marine view sketched down the Narrows. Though they exchanged only glances, both resolved to know each other better. Rosie's father had died when she was only 14, and life had been a struggle for her and her mother. But a year ago, their fortunes had changed when they received a letter from a wealthy senator who had been moved by Rosie's singing at a musicale on Fifth Avenue. He had been struck by her charming simplicity and vivacity of manner, and upon seeing the name Ricci in the New York Tribune, he decided to reach out to them. In his letter, he expressed his tenderest feelings and offered his assistance to the family. The article reported on the demise of Raphael Ricci, a former consul, and the senator wanted to know more about the situation. Did Ricci leave behind any inheritance? If not, would his family receive any aid to help his daughter, Rosie Ricci, continue her musical education? The mother dropped the senator's letter in shock, but Rosie picked it up and asked what was wrong. "It's not bad news, my child. It might be good news. A stranger has offered to help us in our time of need. I wonder what it all means. Is the senator acting on behalf of your father's spirit? Or is there something more sinister at play?" "Tell me, Mother. Tell me everything," Rosie exclaimed, and began reading the letter aloud. She was overjoyed and embraced her mother. "The Lord is good to us." In June, Mrs. Ricci and Rosie met with the senator at the Fifth Avenue Hotel. They arranged for Rosie to receive the best musical education in Boston, and for the senator to cover her expenses in both Boston and New York, including their rent. The mother sometimes questioned the senator's motives, but he always seemed kind and fatherly. As he left, the senator gave Mrs. Ricci several bills and said, "You and Rosie will need these for clothes and other expenses." Rosie was thrilled the day she and her mother left for New England. She worked tirelessly at her studies, burning with ambition for fame and fortune to help her mother. She often walked with a friend among the historic elms on Boston Common and in beautiful flower gardens at sunset. Many young men sought her attention, but she remained uninterested. Rosie was petite with black hair, dark brown eyes, ruby-red lips, and finely chiseled nose and chin. Her complexion had an olive tint that spoke of her sunny Italian heritage. She had a lively and confident manner, always dressed stylishly and carried a roll of music in one hand and lovely flowers in the other. After completing her studies, Marcellus pursued her relentlessly, and Rosie eventually agreed to an engagement without her mother's knowledge. The golden ring held a single ruby, and Marcellus had engraved the Latin phrase et teneo et teneor on its inside. When Rosie saw the motto, she remarked how fitting it was for their love and devotion to bind them together forever, along with their memories of Italy. But she questioned why the ring was worn on the third finger before marriage. Marcellus explained that the Egyptians believed the third finger was warmed by an artery from the heart, and it was the first finger a newborn could move, and the last one to lose control when dying. However, Rosie dismissed this as nonsense, and explained that the wedding ring was originally worn on the forefinger, and Christianity moved it to the third finger during the ceremony. Marcellus and Rosie's love was as unselfish as Abelard and Heloise's. Marcellus's paintings now displayed colors in perfect harmony, and his Madonna faces and landscapes were praised by fellow artists who were unaware of his secret. For Christmas, Marcellus gave Rosie a painting of her hand holding lilies of the valley and a Florentine cameo once worn by his mother. But a week before Marcellus left on a steamer with the Drakes, he and Rosie had a fight. He sailed without telling her about his plans or saying goodbye. Marcellus regretted his actions and wished he could ask for Rosie's forgiveness. During their argument, Rosie had thrown the ruby ring and cameo at him, saying he could easily find another girl to share his poverty as an artist while she needed wealth. Marcellus realized how much he missed Rosie's presence in his studio and how much he loved her. In his private musings, Marcellus sometimes worried that Rosie's beauty and charming personality would attract wealth, while other times he dared to dream that his talent and fame might bring him a handsome dowry. But then his thoughts turned to Kimberly. She wasn't as lively as Rosie, but she still enjoyed herself. Sometimes he even thought to himself, "It's her or no one on this planet." But then he would remember the ring he gave to Rosie, and he would feel ashamed of his false affection. Marcellus was lucky that he was a skilled sailor, as it allowed him to do many thoughtful things for the Drakes and show his gratitude for their kindness. On the third day of their journey from New York, the storm calmed down a bit during breakfast, and the number of passengers visibly increased. But before lunch was over, the gale returned with even more force. The ship had crossed the center of the cyclone, where the storm's power was diminished for a brief moment. But all afternoon and night, the gale grew stronger, and it seemed like the ocean was being turned upside down by some kind of volcanic force. The pent-up forces in the west had been unleashed, and Neptune, the god of the sea, was on the move with his three-pronged trident. The waves were bombarding the ship with tremendous force, and the twin propellers were racing so fiercely that the ship's speed was reduced to a minimum. By morning, the terrible cyclone had moved north, and the seas were smoother by lunchtime. Most of the tables were filled again, and many first-time voyagers appeared, subjecting themselves to teasing from the seasoned ocean travelers. Captain Morgan and Dr. Argyle received many compliments for their skill. At dinner, Marcellus and Alfonso both had full forces, and each side scored points. Mrs. Drake and Kimberly entered the dining room, and everyone enjoyed the menu after a 3-day fast. Captain Morgan referred to the storm as the late unpleasantness, and hoped his friends wouldn't desert him again. Alfonso and Kimberly promised loyalty for the future, and Marcellus said, "Captain Morgan, I don't think I've missed a meal." "Bravo, Parsanian," the captain replied. "You seem to have inherited the sailing qualities of your great countryman Columbus, and I hope you can render the world equally valuable services." Kimberly added, "I'm sure he will, Captain. During the gale he helped many suffering people." "Tomorrow," continued Captain Morgan, "is June 21st, when day and night will be of equal length, and the sun will rise and set promptly at 6 o'clock. "Why not?" said Kimberly. "Set our watches by the ship's chronometer, and have the steward wake us up at 5:30 and test the accuracy of the almanac." Mrs. Drake and several others enthusiastically agreed to the plan. The fresh sea air was so invigorating that when the clock struck 3 bells, or 5:30 a.m., the Drake party woke up easily and quickly got ready to witness the sunrise on June 21st. Marcellus and Alfonso were the first ones on deck, followed by Mrs. Drake, Kimberly, and Judge, whom they had met on the ship. Their watches showed that it was 10 minutes to 6. The decks were clean, the engines were running at full speed, and the eastern sky was painted with crimson and golden hues that spread out from the horizon and faded into the zenith. With watches in their hands, everyone's eyes were fixed on a bright path of light on the sea and sky in the east. Suddenly, as the sailor rang out 4 bells, or 6 o'clock, Kimberly exclaimed, "Look, see that drop of molten gold floating on the horizon. Captain Morgan was right about the time. See, Judge, how the gold glows with heat and light as the globe turns to receive the sun's blessings." "Yes," replied the judge, who was now enthusiastic for the first time since the storm. "Another page of the record book is turned, and the good and bad deeds of humanity will be recorded by the angels. The mighty sun, around which we revolve at a fabulous speed, is the most important material fact in the universe in relation to us mortals. If I ever change my religion, I shall become a sun worshipper. The Turk faces the sun 5 times a day in his prayers." An early brisk walk on the deck sharpened their appetites, and the sun worshippers were among the first to have breakfast. Gradually, others joined them, and the dining room was filled with cheerful faces. After breakfast, the decks were bustling with pretty women, children, and gentlemen lifting their hats. The promenade was as lively as Fifth Avenue. Dr. Argyle escorted Mrs. Drake, while Kimberly walked between Alfonso and Marcellus. doctors of divinity and men of repute in other professions walked together. Actors and actresses moved gracefully as if they were on stage. A famous actor carried a little girl on his shoulders who had sky-blue eyes, a fair face, and fluffy hair that floated in the sea breeze, making a pretty picture. Businessmen with fragrant cigars shared the latest stories or jokes. Gradually, the promenade disappeared as passengers chose their steamer chairs, library, or smoking room, and formed interesting and picturesque groups with like-minded people. At the beginning of the voyage, one might wonder at the lack of fine dress and hastily judge the modest men and women around them to be somewhat ordinary. However, after spending days at sea and making many acquaintances, one would discover their mistake and realize that their companions were thoroughly cosmopolitan. In fair weather, the decks became playgrounds where children played games and sailors' songs could be heard. When the old clipper ship took 4 to 6 weeks to cross the Atlantic, a weekly newspaper was printed. During the 4th day of travel aboard some of the swiftest liners of today, a paper is distributed to passengers, even as the ship rolls through the roaring 40s. This 4-page sheet, measuring 6 inches wide and 9 inches long, contains a description of the ship signed by the captain, along with daily updates on the ship's progress, the remaining distance to the destination, and the estimated time of arrival. Under the section titled General Information, passengers can read about seasickness and the importance of exercise while aboard the ship, as well as useful tips for handling luggage in Europe. The sheet also features prose and poetry contributed by skilled writers among the passengers, as well as a column of queries, brief stories, and jokes to lighten the mood. The price for a copy of The Ocean Breeze is 15 cents, and it is highly valued by passengers. For many, the enforced rest and escape from newspapers, telegrams, creditors, and tax collectors is a welcome relief. At 11 o'clock every pleasant day, a well-dressed man accompanied by his valet opens a barrel of fresh oysters for the passengers. This man is a famous Saratoga gambler, and his generosity with the oysters helps him make friends and acquaintances. He uses his gambling skills to increase his winnings at cards and bets on the vessel's run, eventually causing the guileless passengers to pay for the oysters. Gambling is not just a business for the oyster advertising man, but a passion for an actor who plays with a pretty child. His obsession is so intense that he attempts to match silver dollars or gold sovereigns with everyone he meets when ashore. During breaks between acts on stage, he telegraphs his bets to distant cities. Even while walking down Broadway, he conceals a coin in his palm, ready to match with anyone. He would even match his coat, his home, or his bank account. On the ship, he only matches sovereigns. Occasionally, the Majestic passes by another ship or tramp steamer, and the two vessels exchange names and locations through signals. However, such encounters are rare, as the course outward is quite to the north to avoid collisions. The days on board pass by like a dream, with passengers half awake and half asleep. For some, a sweet or strong face may catch their interest or heart, leading to lifelong friendships. The confidence bestowed upon others often begets the same in return, and passengers are grateful for the ocean voyage.